Hi, English 1301 students, it's Dr. Murray. I'm making this video to discuss your essay that's an analysis of the thin blue line. So to get right into it, the question you're answering in this essay is pretty straightforward. Who is most at fault for the wrongful conviction of Randall Adams? So by the time we get to the end of the film and watch particularly the conversation between David Harris and Errol Morris, I think it becomes pretty clear that Adams is not guilty of the crime and that David Harris is. I wouldn't say that David Harris explicitly confesses, in that it seems like he's still resisting a full and total confession, but he says enough that I'm not sure it can be interpreted any other way when he says, because I'm the one that knows, when asked how he can be sure that Adams is innocent. Because before that, David Harris says, I'm sure he is innocent. Errol Morris says, how can you be sure? And he says, because I'm the one that knows. There are other things he says in that recording that also, I think, suggest, or more strong, or you could use a word more strongly than suggest, that David Harris is the one who killed Robert Wood. So the essay is who's most at fault for the wrongful conviction of Randall Adams. To answer that question in your thesis statement, you can really kind of take the wording of my question and rearrange the words. I mean, you can use your own wording if you want, but you can also essentially rearrange my words and make it into a statement about who you think is most at fault for the wrongful conviction of Randall Adams. You can't name everybody, and there are a lot of people that could potentially be in the conversation about who's most at fault. Some of them will be individuals. An example would be Judge Don Metcalf. We've discussed that a little bit, and there are different things that we find out in the film that would provide sort of support for that position if you included him on your list. Besides individuals on your list, you might, and that list, by the way, should come in the thesis statement itself. But in that list, you might also include groups of people. An example of a group of people would be the witnesses. Now, when I say the witnesses, I'm particularly thinking of Robert and Emily Miller, the married couple, and Michael Randall. And I'm thinking of the witnesses that were sort of sworn in when, Edith James and Dennis White came into the courtroom, and they were sort of surprised to see them sworn in. Now, of course, another one of the witnesses against Randall Adams was David Harris. However, David Harris played such an important role in, the arrest, conviction, trial, conviction of Randall Adams, that to merely include him as just one of the witnesses would seem a little odd, because he was such an important part of all of this, and there would be a lot more to talk about, I think, than just his role as a witness. So he's obviously one of the individuals you could consider. And if I'm falling short of giving a long list of the people to consider, it's partly because I want you to think about it a little bit. But I'm not saying the people that I name are the people you need to have on your list. There are other people you could name, which we can talk about. But it might be some combination of a couple individuals in a group. Another group of people might be the Dallas police. And I'm thinking particularly of Gus Rose and sort of the other guys we see sort of wearing a jacket and tie being interviewed in the film. I think they're all wearing a jacket and tie, probably because they're homicide detectives, whereas technically Teresa Turco, Robert Wood's partner, is also a Dallas police officer. But I think if you were going to talk about her, it would make sense to talk about her as an individual, because if you included her on your list, there's a lot of stuff to talk about that's specific to her, but she wasn't involved in the sort of arrest and, sort of gathering of evidence against Randall Adams, so it wouldn't make sense to group her with the other Dallas cops like that. I mean, you could talk about both if you wanted to, but it would make sense to kind of put the sort of Dallas homicide detectives in one category, Teresa Turco in another, if you were going to talk about her. But anyway, it's all a way of saying that you might have a group of people or a couple groups of people on your list. You might have an individual or two or maybe three. How many sort of parties do you need on your list? You only need 3, I would say, but if you wanted to talk about 4, that would be fine. The length of the essay, as I put it in the assignment sheet, is 2.5 to 5 pages, so that gives you a range. Really, I would probably like to see more like 3 to 5, but I just made it 2.5. So anyway, you can decide what you want to do. That range also suggests that you might have multiple body paragraphs about a single person you're discussing or single group of people you're discussing. There are some people in the film that there's enough about them that I could imagine writing a couple body paragraphs. There are some people in the film where there might be things you could say about them. But for instance, if you decided to devote an entire paragraph to Michael Randall, the witness, that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, because there's some stuff about him, but I don't know if there's enough just specifically about him. It might make more sense to talk about him in conjunction with the Millers as that sort of group of witnesses. Okay, so as for what you do in the individual paragraphs, let's start with the introduction. Similar to the other papers you've written, you're going to want to begin by giving us some important information about the film, the title in italics, the year the film was released, 1988, the genre documentary, the director Errol Morris. You're going to want to give an overview of the film, a summary, yes, but also perhaps addressing, what the form of the film is like, in the sense of that it consists of interviews and questions and so forth. But largely, you've got to remember that your reader is potentially someone who isn't familiar with this film. So you're going to have to give them an overview of the crime, what we encounter in the film as far as the sort of arrest, the prosecution, the conviction, and so on. Okay, a little bit who we hear from. But, you can't have so much that you're going to have a super long introduction. So you got to figure out how to do that in, convey that information and the overview in whatever, 6 sentences, 7 sentences, something like that. And then transition smoothly and logically into a thesis statement that addresses the question. And that will be your thesis that ends your introduction, and it will, answer my question and include that list of who you're going to talk about. So that's your introduction. Then you're going to have body paragraphs that deal with the people or parties on your list, okay? And so you want to start each body paragraph with a topic sentence that announces the focus. So if it's a body paragraph about Judge Don Metcalf, your topic sentence should indicate that. But at the same time, the other thing besides announcing the focus of the paragraph that the topic sentence needs to do is some way connect to the thesis. And so it's not just a paragraph about Don Metcalf, but it's a paragraph about Judge Don Metcalf being one of the people most at fault for the conviction of Randall Adams. Once you make that clear in your topic sentence, then you want to get into your evidence about what information, what quotes do we counter in the film, what scenes do we see in the film that would support that assertion that he's one of the people most at fault. And then you want to analyze what evidence you've offered and explain the evidence, and then ultimately link it back to your original claim. Do that in each body paragraph. Yeah. So there are going to be some people where maybe there's more than one body paragraph about that person. I mean, for instance, David Harris is perhaps someone where if you were discussing him, it would merit more than one body paragraph. Now don't just put random things about David Harris in the paper, or just information about David Harris, but things that contribute to that support the assertion that he's one of the people most responsible for the conviction of Randall Adams. So therefore, I cannot tell you exactly how many body paragraphs. Obviously, you'll have at least 3, but that would seem short. I mean, that would be maybe what you had if you had a 2.5-page paper. But I'm hoping, at least for the person that you think is most at fault, you're going to have a couple body paragraphs about them. Maybe you have a couple body paragraphs about a couple of the people on your list. And it also raises the question, how many people you're putting on your list. Again, you put at least 3 on your list. But if you want to talk about more, it's a 2.5 to 5-page paper. As far as your conclusion, of course, you're going to revisit your thesis statement in your conclusion, worded slightly differently, but then you're going to reflect on the significance of, what you've discussed in the paper. And so, I listed a bunch of questions to consider. Maybe I overdid it with my questions, but really I'm just trying to inspire thought about it. But the main question is, why is all of this significant? Why is it significant to look closely at a movie that examines this situation this closely? One question I ask also is, what accounts for Morris's ability to successfully bring the truth to light? And so in a way I'm asking, how did he succeed in this? Because it's entirely plausible that someone could decide to make a film about this and not succeed in the way that he did. And, maybe the bit you hear on the tape recorder at the end might give you a little to think about there, just because you actually hear Errol Morris talking with David Harris, whereas in other places you hear mostly just what people are saying in response to questions that you don't hear, right? But really, I put as my final question, what lessons can we take away from our close engagement with this film? What's important about this film? What do we learn from this film? What does Errol Morris sort of teach us by making this film? One thing about him is he acknowledges he didn't necessarily know where all this was going. In fact, when he first started looking into it, he wasn't at all convinced that Adams was innocent. He said he had talked to a bunch of people on death row as he was researching another project that sort of morphed into this project. And he said everybody on death row says they're innocent. So he didn't really necessarily believe Adams at first, but he heard so many interesting things about this case that he started looking into it. But how is it that he got the goods, so to speak? And what lessons are to be learned? So I'll just have to leave it there, but that's a start. But read the assignment sheet and we can discuss it some more going forward. Thanks.